Oh, when I returned from Korea and began to finish up in grad school, my professor was the head of the history department was Al Kelly, Dr. Kelly, who participated in the Brown versus Board case. He was one of the historians. They had historians, psychologists, and he had written extensively about history. He was the head of the department. I was a history major. And I got more and more interested in this, and I was pre-law, and I ended up in law school, and I'll never forget George Edwards, who became a federal judge, was the head of a committee, and in the end of my first year, I was awarded a scholarship called the Lamson McElhone Scholarship, and it was, I think it was for veterans. Anyway, I was very proud of that, and I was working, I'd been overseas, and I was trying to catch up. I'd always go to summer school, and so in my senior year, Governor Swainson, no, Governor G. Minnie Williams, hired the attorney Charles Brown, whose son is now a lawyer, to go to Lansing with him, and it left a vacancy in the Congressional office of my congressman, John Dingell. And the friends of the congressman said, well, why, Conyers is a senior in law school, why don't we send him down to interview for the job? Great. So I came down. Those of you who know Detroit, Grand River and the Boulevard, Cunningham Drugstore, Congressional office on the top there. And I was interviewed. And going along swell, and then at the end, I said, well, thanks a lot, Congressman Dingell. I said, but I really don't think I want this job. It's a great opportunity. And he looked at me and said, why not? I said, well, as soon as I finish law school and pass the bar, I'm going out and whip my either my state senator or my state rep and get elected myself. So I really am not going to, you know, this is, and you know, you could tell he was thunderstruck by this. But when my dad and his friends heard what I had done, they called me in and they said, well, I know you got a great career and all that, but do you know what it would mean to have worked in a congressional office as you began your career? And boy, I could tell the way they were talking to me, you know. So hat in hand, I went back to Dingell, and I pleaded for the job and told him that, you know, that I really want to work here. And he listened to me go through all this, and he put his arm around me and said, let's go down to Saunders and have a milkshake. And that started me off. I was working in his office whenever I could, and finishing law school and getting ready for the bar. And we had a great relationship. Then John Swainson became the governor, and he appointed me to to be a referee in workman compensation. And the late Bob Millender was my mentor. He was a referee. He was getting ready to go into private practice. So I learned quickly from him. And then we had President Kennedy called a meeting of lawyers from all over the country to come to the White House to form the Committee for Civil Rights Under Law.
The Avoice Committee.
Right. It was a bipartisan. I remember the Attorney General was a Republican. I think it was Rogers, but I'm not sure. And anyway, Senator McNamara from Michigan picked 3 people to go to this founding meeting in the White House. Myself, then Attorney George Crockett, and then Attorney Damon Keith. And so we all 3 went there, and this was very impressive. I'd never been to the White House, and that was the first president I'd ever met. We were in the Rose Garden, and we took pictures. And well, that was really exciting. And so I came back, and then there was what's the name of that Supreme Court case? There was a Supreme Court case that came out in which the court said there were states that weren't redistricting every 10 years after the decennial census. But this case came out, and it said any state legislature that does not redistrict pursuant to the census every 10 years, we will no longer just criticize you for it. We're going to form a 3-judge panel, and we will draw the districts. And Michigan fell right into that.
Okay.
So there we were. And so we brought a suit. And the governor was George Romney. And they said, well, we've got to follow the Supreme Court. So what are we going to do? And they said, well, we're going to give those Democrats the district that they probably don't want, that they least want. And that was my plan, or our plan that had been drawn up. And so Romney took my plan over other plans because he figured this would make them, his political friends in the other party, most unhappy. And that was the plan. And of course, I knew the city, representing the congressman at all these events and lived there. So when I got through, whenever I'd see him, he said, well, now remember, young man, remember who gave you that district that you won in? And I'd say, yes, sir, I remember. And he'd always let me know that he remembered that I got the district that I thought that I could do well in. And so that's how it all started. And when it was redistricted and I got the district I wanted, then I started out, I remember it was a Thanksgiving the year before the election, Thanksgiving. And here was Bob Millender and I on election day, on Thanksgiving Day, going up and down Grand River looking for a storefront that we could rent for the campaign. And off we went. Of course, I'd never run for office before. And people would meet me and they'd say, John Conyers, is your dad Johnny Conyers? Who everybody knew my father. They said, well, if you're like your dad, we'll vote for you. I don't know anything about you, but we'll give you a chance. We'll try you out. And I won. Martin Luther King came to Detroit when I couldn't wait to get down south. And it's a funny thing, you never know something that you're doing thinking you're helping somebody else, and you're helping yourself. I mean, as a result, I couldn't wait to get out of law school to go down south with the Southern Christian Leadership Council. And King and Andy Young and Lowry and Abernathy, Julian Bond, they were all coming up to Detroit to raise money. And they'd raise a few $1,000s. But I got to know King and the kids. They were just little kids then, the King family. And boy, did I have some times in the Mississippi courts. They always resented the fact that I would come from Michigan to try to practice law in the sovereign state of Mississippi. And frequently, what would happen is that they would forget the little guy that had been arrested for picketing or protesting or whatever. And they turned, this lawyer, why does he think he can fly in here and go into our state courts and represent people? He's not, you don't have a license to practice in Mississippi. And by the time they got through with me, they didn't even care about the person that was supposed to be prosecuted. I was defending myself from getting locked up myself. And it was just incredible. And so Dr. King would come to Central Methodist Church in downtown Detroit, usually for Easter or Good Friday. He was very popular there. As a matter of fact, the 1963 march, before we went to Washington, we marched down Woodward Avenue with Walter Reuther, president of UAW, C.L. Franklin, and other notables. But the I Have a Dream part of his speech was being worked on there. That was where we first heard it. But he endorsed me. When Coretta King was doing her biography, she called me and she said, John, Martin never endorsed anybody. And people keep telling me that he endorsed you. And I said, oh yes, I wore that paper, I had it pinned on my forehead. And I went around, and we took pictures and all that. And she said, well, I just want to make sure, because that was not his practice. And I was flattered to be the only member of Congress he ever endorsed for that position.
May I ask you, you won your election, you've been reelected ever since. Now, you come to the Congress. Tell us what that was like, first coming to the Congress, and how did you get assigned to the Judiciary Committee and all those kinds of experiences that you had, first as a freshman member of Congress?
Well, I went to Speaker McCormick, John W. McCormick, Boston, cigar this long. And, I was pleading with him to be assigned to judiciary because no African American in the history of the Congress had ever been assigned to judiciary. And he picked up the phone and said, "Hey, Wilbur, I've got this young Conyers over here, and I'm sending him over to you, and see what you can do."
Was that Wilbur Mills?
Wilbur Mills.
Chairman
that's
of the
right.
Ways and Means Committee at the time.
Chairman of
Right.
Ways and Means Committee, but he was also chairman of the Committee on Committees
Right.
that decided where freshmen were assigned.
Right.
And I went to Judiciary Committee, and that's the committee I stayed on. At one time, I had government operations and judiciary. And Jack Brooks was ahead of me on both committees. So when he became chairman of judiciary after Manny Seller, then I became chairman of government operations committee. And that's where I met Perry Applebaum and a number of other people. It was just really great. We had so many wonderful things happen. 3 days, though, after Martin's assassination, I kept thinking, what is the highest honor we could bestow? You know, the country were lots of riots and break-ins and so forth. And so I said, a holiday for Martin Luther King. And I started doing that every year. And then my good friend Stevie Wonder, who came out of Motown in Detroit, but he was in Hollywood then, wrote a song, "Happy Birthday, Dr. King." And he'd come and march with us every January 15th. It would always be cold. And, but that song really lifted us up. One day I saw Dizzy Gillespie, who was at Blues Alley, and he was standing out there behind the fence. "Diz, come on up here," and we let him in. And one year, the phone rang, the White House was calling. And they didn't want to speak to me, they wanted to speak to Stevie Wonder. I'm not surprised at that. Stevie Wonder said, I said, "Stevie, this is great, this is the break." He said, "No, I'm not going." I said, "Are you kidding? That's what we're protesting. That's what we're marching about." He said, "No, I won't go." We went back and forth. But the long and short of it was that an agreement was struck that if we could pass the bill, the president would sign it. And I think that he believed that we'd never be able to pass the bill. So we finally, with Perrin Mitchell was the chairman then, we finally got it through. Gus Savage was there, and all the guys, and the wonderful woman from Texas, Barbara Jordan, Charlie Rangel, Bob Nix. Anyway, we finally got it through the House. Then we got to the Senate. Oh, we pushed and pulled and prayed and marched. Finally, the bill came up in the Senate. And the senators, they took all day. They were making speeches great oratory. You thought each one of them sounded like King was from his state. I mean, they were praising King. They made the house look like pikers. And boy, they were giving these speeches, and of course, Coretta King and the Lowry and the kids and Andy and everybody had flown up there. Julian Bond was there. And the press came over to me afterward and said, "What took so long, 15 years?" They said everybody was for the bill all the time. And for a moment, I almost lost my nonviolent composure. Because, I mean, we had worked and prayed, marched, sat in, everybody, but when the time comes, it's a very vital lesson for us. When people power really raises it up, then all of a sudden, everybody's for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what happened. Well, I can only tell you that when we were coming together, we went to Adam Clayton Powell. Adam, we're going to form a caucus. And Adam looked at us. He said, "You're going to form a what?" Okay. We're going to form a caucus so we can band together and work. And he said, "What are you going to do that for?" We said, "Well, so that African Americans we can be coordinated." He said, "I represent all African Americans. You don't need to form a caucus." We said, "Oh, no." And so we finally got it organized. We said, "Well, we have to do this over Adam." And Charles Dawson, another member from Chicago, was there. And neither of them never really got very interested in it. They just figured, who needed this? And it was very interesting. Charlie Diggs was elected the first chairman, and I think Bill Clay was the treasurer. And we said, "Okay, we're going to sell tickets for the first Black Caucus dinner. And we're going to charge $100. And half the caucus said, $100? Are you out of your mind? Who's going to pay $100 to come to a CBC dinner on a Saturday evening? And there was a big controversy. Ossie Davis was the first speaker, remember?
Yeah.
What was the thing he came up with?
No permanent friends, no permanent enemies, but only permanent interests, right?
That may have been it. There was some phrase that just caught on, and Ossie Davis was so eloquent, and the dinner was a tremendous success, and that's how we started out.
Right. Well, let's talk a little bit more about some of the issues that the CBC has championed over the years, and take it back to something, again, I know from your campaign slogan, your first slogan was Jobs, Peace, and Justice, if I'm not mistaken.
Jobs, Justice, and Peace.
Jobs, Justice, and Peace. And how have those issues that you championed in the past been taken up with the caucus historically, and how do they kind of shape themselves today? Some of the issues that you're dealing with today, and how does the caucus work today on these kinds of issues?
We're still working on jobs, justice, and peace. Really.
Right.
I had no idea. I remember when we came up with that, Bob Miller and I wrote about what do you stand for? What is it? What are your issues? What are you all about? And I wrote 2 pages on yellow legal pad, and Bob said, no. Nobody's going to ever read all that. We got to get this down. And that's how we came up with Jobs, Justice, and Peace. And it became very popular. It was my slogan on my bumper stickers and everything else. And of course, in 1965, we passed the Medicare bill. And in '64, before I got there, we passed the Civil Rights Bill. In 1965, we passed the Voter Rights Act. So these were momentous things that were following along. Well, here we are right now working on health care again. I think we're going into our 8th year in Iraq. We have 4,000 men and women in service, and Lord knows how many civilians, casualties there have been. We're still not out of Iraq, and now it looks like we may be getting mired down in Afghanistan. The Humphrey Hawkins Full Employment and Balanced Growth
HR
Act.
50.
I forgot the number. I think you're right, it was. And I work very closely with Gus Hawkins, and we got it through the House. And we were over in the Senate, outside the chambers, and there were the AFL people and civil rights people. Coretta Scott King had come in. And she said, I go along with the Congress. We're arguing about what to do about this. She said, we got to get this bill passed. And we did. But it never got properly funded. One of the things I'm working on right now is restarting the Humphrey Hawkins Act. It's always stayed on the books, but it was never funded and never implemented. And so I've got, I don't see it here, but that's one of the things I'm working on, because it's my belief we're really in a depression and not a recession. And some of the areas of the country were in a depression before the financial dislocation occurred. They were already on the bottom. Detroit has something like 22% unemployment. Well, look, you're not in a recession, and then all the plants are closed that are going to be closed. And when you lose your job, since it's employer-based health insurance, you lose your health insurance. And so this idea of jobs, this idea of peace and justice, we've been working on police violence. We've been working on reducing crime. And of course, it always spikes up when you have these massive dislocations. Bobby Scott of Virginia, a brilliant lawyer, heads up our subcommittee on crime. And we had hearings in which, and we met with the people in Michigan, in Detroit. It's not easy getting lawyers to dedicate themselves, especially to complex cases, for example, murder cases, where you're going to be there for a while. You don't spend a day or two and say, well, that takes care of that. No, you got to put a lot of time and work in. And we're trying to increase the number of people that are represented. It's very important that those who are accused, And then the lawyers get appointed to represent them. And we don't have enough. We're working with the American Bar, the National Bar Association, and other lawyers. And matter of fact, no. I spent a lot of time working to get lawyers to learn this part of the business, to give back. And some of them do an amazingly good job. And now with DNA playing a larger and larger role, there's frequently amazing results that you can find that a person has been incarcerated for long periods of time, can be released because it becomes clear that it just doesn't, the evidence doesn't work out. And we're working also with the prison system. Only today we had a hearing in the same committee, subcommittee, and the head of the Federal Bureau of Prisons was there. And we're working on getting better health care and getting the conditions better and making sure the security is appropriate and trying to reduce the huge numbers of people. As you know, we incarcerate more people per population than any nation on earth. Yes, the power of the caucus has increased enormously because of the fact that we hold more positions. For a long time, there were only two, Adam Clayton Powell and Bill Dawson. And now, of course, the tax writing committee, Ways and Means, is incredibly important. Judiciary, I remember Seller was there, Manny Seller, Jack Brooks, yep, and then myself. And I mean, it's just incredible. And the Judiciary Committee had jurisdiction over the Federal Criminal Code, immigration, the Bureau of Prisons, the correction system, mandatory minimum sentencing, which we're trying to get rid of, copyright, patents, and trademark. Some international treaties come our way. We have a huge jurisdiction, and we're very proud of our staff. We work as an extended family because we don't let bureaucracy or protocol get in our way when we're doing work. And then in addition, I don't know how this happened, but I ended up with health care reform. And so I was in the White House the day that the First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton called us into the White House and said, now look, Ira Magaziner was there, please give us a chance. We're working on a reform bill. And so we had a universal health care bill. And we said, sure, look, the First Lady is doing this. You know, we stepped back. And now here we are again, working on the same thing. And just today's Tuesday, on a Friday, on the Education and Labor Committee. There are 3 committees in the House and 2 committees in the Senate working on this reform bill. Guess what? Dennis Kucinich from Cleveland, Ohio, had passed on Friday an amendment that would allow states to take up universal health care, single payer, if the state so chose. It would be optional. And we were really celebrating because we're worried about the bill. There's so many powerful factions that you begin to wonder how we're going to make a deadline or even pass it, even if we do extend the period. We're supposed to get this finished before we go out on the August recess. And I don't see that happening. But it's a wonderful challenge, and this gives us new hope, because that's a great stimulus for the 84 other members of Congress that are on my universal single-payer health care bill, H.R. 676. And so now we're hoping that the Blue Dogs don't disappoint us, and the Republicans have not been particularly responsible to the overtures of the president. And so, you know, the politics and the philosophies of members all make this a very interesting session. Haiti is the most wretched place on the Western Hemisphere. And we went to President Bill Clinton and urged him to intervene, and he sent Colin Powell, Sam Nunn, who was then head of Armed Services, and there was a third person, and they they went down there and told General, I forget his name now, but he had run the president, first democratically elected president, been run out of Haiti, and President Clinton let him stay in residence here in Washington, D.C., Juan Bertrand Aristide. And Colin Powell told us that they went down to deliver the word to General Cedras, that you got to give this up, we got to and there was this huge pistol laying on the table, and a fellow came running into the meeting and said, "The American planes are coming, the planes are coming." And boy, everybody said, "Uh-oh." And what do we do now? And there was one little old senior man in the corner. He said, "You must leave Haiti." He talked to the general. He said, "You must leave Haiti, you must give it up." And everybody was looking at this huge pistol that was laying on and they said, "The planes, Americans are coming." And so everybody was getting out of there. And Colin Powell said, boy, everybody didn't know what was going to happen then. And we went to Haiti last year. We're getting ready to go again. Ron Daniels takes us back. We just had a meeting last week, and we're still working on it. Proval is now the president, who was selected to be vice president under Aristide. is now the president. And so we're very eager to help start the rebuilding process. And the Haitians are a very wonderful people, very friendly, very cultured. They have a great musical history, music and song and dance. So I'm still going there, Stephanie, and we're still connected with it in a very big way. Now, are there any things I wish I could have done? Yes. I got a list so long. Look, full employment. We need full employment. I've got to go back and dig up the Humphrey Hawkins Act. Many people don't remember it. Peace. We've got to reduce our military. People wonder where we're going to get the money. Oh, my distinguished chair from Houston, Texas, Sheila Jackson Lee, is just coming to me. How nice of you. We've got to reduce this military race that is draining the treasuries of so many countries, but mostly ours. And we got to work toward peace and justice, and we're getting there. The total surprise when it started out of the Obama campaign was so incredible, and it wasn't till he got to Iowa. When you can take Iowa, when all the African Americans in that state could fit very comfortably into this hall, you know, everybody said, oh, something is really happening. And, you know, Senator Obama, he was a senator then, he called me up to come over, and I know he's going to talk about the campaign that everybody was whispering about. And I urged him to run. And he said at that time, he said, now wait a minute, John. He said, I just want you to know one thing in our household. My wife has not signed off on this effort. And so this may be just a conversation that, you know, won't mean a thing. And I said, well, you got to persuade her to hey, this is bigger than your wonderful relationship. You got to get her going. And he succeeded, and they got going. But as a result of that, people give me a credit I absolutely do not deserve, because when I was telling him to run, I didn't think he was going to win. I supported Jesse Jackson, and you go great, and then you run out of gas. Twice, Shirley Chisholm. And so people still come up to me and say, oh gosh, your political wisdom and insight. You knew when you first started out on his campaign. I said, I didn't know anything. I thought I was going to end up supporting Hillary Clinton just like everybody else. But I said, we should run first. And it happened. So I just want to point out one mistaken assumption that unfortunately I keep reading about all the time, is that now that Barack Obama's the 44th president, everything is okay. And that is the biggest mistake and assumption that one can imagine. As a matter of fact, in some ways, his ascension gives some people the opportunity to go back to their old bad practices because everybody's thinking, well, everything's okay now, isn't it? Well, no, it isn't okay. The fight for justice and liberty is a continuing struggle. Our founding fathers articulated that many, many times. And of course, now, and I have a huge Arab American population, the largest concentration of Arabs in the United States is in my district. And they have nearly 24 different religions and races inside the Arab community. So it's really very interesting for me to see that this work is still going on, still important. We go to Louisiana, the penitentiary there in Louisiana is unbelievable. They had 3 men in solitary confinement for 40 years. 40 years in solitary confinement. And we're working on that in every way that we can. So the work doesn't end. And I just keep thinking about the fact, and this is the blessings that I have. We were talking before we started. We were campaigning in South Carolina against Strom Thurmond. Was that 1978? Yeah, and we had a little group down there, and didn't get very far, by the way. The one thing about democracy, it means different things to different people. It would be so convenient if everybody agreed on it. But then what would the courts be doing? Here's this little 20-page statement of the Constitution with a preamble and 27 amendments. But the law is full of interpretations, some that go through changes about what does this mean? The First Amendment, what does it mean? Well, let's see, depends on the circumstances. And poor Mrs. Sotomayor, boy, she went through it, but they really, I thought their questions were more revealing about them than the answers. I mean, here was a senator that had been rejected for court, and he's questioning her like he was the supreme authority on judicial conduct and their approach to their duties. So it's a never-ending job. And now Arab Americans have frequently found themselves in the position that African Americans were in. We had an Arab American congressman on the Judiciary Committee that was pulled off a plane because someone complained about he looked suspicious. And he was a member of Congress. And so trying to deal with this question and criminal justice is a never-ending challenge. And all I can say is that it's because I love my work, I stay in the Congress. I mean, you get up every day, you're dealing with questions that help shape the present and the future of this country, which affects governing and judicial attitudes of other people in other countries around the world. They're studying us and listening to us and examining us.